Hello.
Hi. At the start of every episode, I just wait for you to start. I'm waiting.
Yeah, I know. Maybe that's because I'm the manifesting generator. I'm like my energy is like boom.
Yes,
Um,
announce.
yeah, but welcome back to Spiritually Unfiltered. We are very excited about today's episode, and I think everybody else will be really excited to hear the topic we're going to talk on today, which is what, Seema?
It's feminine energy, but not in the way that we have. Well, it is kind of in the way that we've spoken about it, but with a twist. I feel like every podcast I've been on and I've spoken about feminine energy, it's always been in relationship to dating and the masculine. We want to talk about feminine energy today, just in its essence. So, for men and for women, and what it looks like in living with your feminine energy and how it shows up, how to sit with it, because I think we've both noticed in our own journeys how our feminine is showing up, how it's evolving, how it feels in our bodies. And so it's more so of like a day to day life of what that looks like for us. And then also aspects of that, like for men, how feminine energy shows up for men, how it supports men, because it's a frequency we all carry.
Yeah, and I
So yeah,
think as well when it comes to anything, like everything we talk about, especially like a feminine energy, it's going to show up in other areas of your life. It's not, we kind of talk a lot, like you said, about how it shows up with the masculine counterpart and how it shows up in relationships. But actually, when you have and you're connected to your own feminine energy, it's going to show up in so many other areas. You're going to notice how it shows up in other areas of your life.
it literally becomes how you do life,
Yeah.
and so to intentionally incorporate this aspect of yourself in life, like it shifts things and it makes things just easier. Like right before this call, we were talking about when you bring in feminine energy into your life, especially as men, that's where you move from hustle culture to align culture, and you start to create things out of alignment and not hustle, because alignment requires your intuition and your emotions, which is your feminine. And so
Yeah.
this is where
And
the feminine is so important.
absolutely. And I feel like for me personally, and I think actually a lot of women out there, when it comes to having a business, I think it's incredibly important because what I've found is the more actually in my business, the more that I've embraced my feminine energy and, sort of not rejected, but lessened how much masculine energy that I was showing up in my business with, actually, the more easeful, the more effortless, the more I was open to receiving, the more that came into my business when I've done that. And so,
Yeah.
again, it's not just about our relationship with someone else and how we show up in that, but it's something we can use in our business. How are we more open to receiving, you know?
So let's jump right into it, because we like to
Mm,
give people like practical things of like what this
yes.
means. Give us like specific examples, like for your business. What did it look like shifting into your feminine and showing up in a more feminine way that like supported your expansion?
So I would say the number one thing that I did, and I've told you about this as well, and I think you have implemented it a little bit too, but actually following my cycle has been absolutely life-changing in
That
my business.
is that is, how people love to talk about biohack this, I think that is the greatest biohack a woman can use, is just track your cycles and pay attention to the weekly hormones. Yes, continue, because you changed my life when you told me to pay attention to this.
Because, I mean, when we actually think about it, when I think about it now, after it is something that I've fully embraced, I'm kind of like, how is that not something that we do? How is that
Right.
not something that we're taught? Or, why do we expect ourselves to show up exactly the same every day when our hormones, our biology is
Mhm.
saying something else? And, rather than us sort of forcing ourselves to show up like we do in ovulation, when
Mhm.
we're ovulating, it's like everything is like beautiful, everything's amazing. I have so much energy. I'm sort of, it's that summer season, that summer vibe where you have so much energy to create, right? But how would I be forcing myself to be in that same energy when I am on my period? It doesn't
Right.
work the same. It
No,
doesn't work the
no.
same.
And I think it's been hidden from us as women from the time that we're little girls, and none of this was revealed to us. So we don't
Mm,
even understand the natural ebbs and flows of ourselves. And so we unintentionally are working against ourselves because we're expecting ourselves to have the same energy all month long, like men do in their 24-hour biological clock. And we don't operate that way, and so it's like we're working against ourselves. But one thing I learned, because you told me pay attention to your cycle, and you started to share with me like, oh, the week that I'm like on my period, I lessen my workload. And I was like, huh, let me think about doing that, let me see how that works for me. And when I started to implement that into my own life too, and literally just being like, okay, the week that I'm on my period, let me give myself less clients because I am more tired. It is more of a time of like, I just want to be present with my body. I want to be present with the symptoms I'm having of my cycle and how I'm feeling, what I want to eat. And the presence with myself was so nourishing and so expanding. And it feels so good that I've noticed then the following week and the week after, I have extra energy. I have, like, I can take on even more than I could before. Like, I genuinely feel like so renourished, so supercharged. And then I'm paying attention during like that time of ovulation of like the creativity, the joy, the excitement, and I want to do more. And how it even feels in my body when I work with clients in those weeks. And
mm.
it created like this like flowy dance for me that I didn't have before with myself in my business. And it's funny because before you told me about this, and it was just earlier this year that you started doing this, so then you shared it with me. I remember earlier this year I was having a conversation, I think with you and one of my other friends, and I was like, I just feel like I need to take a month off of work because I feel exhausted from it. I love what I do, but I feel exhausted and I don't get it. And some weeks I have energy and I'm like, okay, this works. Let's create a schedule like this. But then it doesn't work in this week and I don't get it. And that's when you were like, Sima, look at what week of your cycle it's on. And that had never crossed my mind. And once I started to look at the week of my cycle, I understood why some weeks I was exhausted and I was like complaining about it. But then other weeks when I had the same workload, it was great and I could even take on more. And it didn't dawn on me, oh my God, it's just your feminine cycles. And when I started to work with that, oh my God, my work, my energy in relationship to my work started flowing. I
And
give
it's
myself,
also, sorry,
I was gonna
it's
say, I give
also,
myself a really light schedule on like the time of my period. The week or two after it, I give myself a very heavy schedule because I can handle it and it feels totally fine. And the week before I get my period, I give myself a moderate schedule because it's in that in between phase. And so it's like it goes like an up and a down, and then work becomes beautiful.
exactly. And I think as well, there is so much beauty in each part of the cycle. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, I almost dedicate different kind of tasks that I do in my work to
You
different
do do
parts of
that.
the cycle.
That's true. You do. I've noticed you do that.
Yeah, so it's like I will schedule, classes or clients or showing up and being like really visible. I know when I love that and I lean into it. And then, for example, in my luteal phase, it's that sort of pulling back, and during that phase, I actually find myself to be way more intuitive. I feel like I can have get so much clarity about, okay, this is maybe not where I want to or what I want to do in my business. So I'm gonna sort of, refine these things. It's like a period of refinement for me. And so following it, oh my God, it just creates this beautiful flow. And and I think as well, so many of us find it so hard to, and this is getting back to feminine energy. We find it so hard to let ourselves rest, to let ourselves trust and lean back. And we can use business as an example because we've been taught that if you want to get results, if you want to get the things that you want, you have to push, you have to hustle, you have to be in that like 24-hour cycle. And it's not true.
There's two things you just said, and I think this is true for both men and women. This is not the part of the
Okay.
feminine that's like just for women. You said rest and trust.
Mm,
That. And you see, with the feminine, and it's something I work with a lot of my clients with, like as they're like shifting into their feminine in many ways, we're so used to do something. In order to be successful, you must do, action, action. And that is like such a masculine thing to do, which is not a bad thing per se. But when you want to create something new and you want to step into something new, we have to be. And that's the rest. That's the not taking physical action, but you're taking internal action. And so it looks like a pause and it looks like a rest. And I think that's something that many people skip over and they don't realize, both men and women, that rest, that pause, and then the trust that things are still moving forward for you in that rest. That's your feminine, because in that rest, in that stillness, it's connecting you to that inner voice, that inner you, that intuition, that wisdom, to give you clarity to then move you forward so you can take aligned action. Because if we don't give ourselves that rest, we're just continue to move with our mind. What's next? What's next? What's that? And go, go, go. And so it's like the thought pattern, that like train of thought is going from that place. We're not even giving it a pause, a rest to be present with ourselves. That's the feminine. And I've noticed for men, especially men that are just like super logical and super like, let's take action, the biggest thing that gets in their own way is that they don't stop and ask themselves, what am I feeling? What do I feel called to do? What vision am I seeing? How is my vision being upgraded or updated in this moment? So when you go, 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 you're like a bull in a china shop. You end up knocking more things down to get to the finish line and creating a bigger mess for yourself than if you had just paused and trusted in that moment to see, how am I going to navigate through this now? And I always tell men, I'm like, don't worry, you will still take action steps. You're not becoming lazy. You're not doing something. You're not doing nothing. You're just pausing to then decide, how do I feel called to navigate through this? And
yeah.
so you actually, when you take that pause, you actually spring forward, and that pause is the feminine.
Yeah. And it's kind of like something I always say is on the surface, right? It looks like we're not being productive, or
Mm-hmm.
that's how we conceptualize it. But it's like your inner world is being productive. So
Right.
most of the time when we're called into that stillness, and that can feel like, oh gosh, I've had a good night's sleep and I don't know why I feel tired, or I feel like I just want to rest today, or I just want to go lay in nature, or whatever it is. We have to learn how to trust, as you said, those like sacred pauses.
Yeah.
It's creativity as well. Creativity doesn't just fall out of the sky. We have to sort of
It comes through
pause
still.
and
Mm-hmm.
allow like that gestation of what we are creating to come to light.
Yeah. I think so many of us are like on this very logical time schedule and crunch and must do this, that we literally forget to flow. Like, for example, we were supposed to record this podcast episode yesterday morning. And I woke up in the morning and I was up and I was like, Abby, I could be ready at this time and I could show up for this, but my energy, like I just feel very like I just want to go inward. And I like it, I was and I asked you, I was like, how do you feel if we move this for tomorrow? And I said, if you can't do it tomorrow, no problem. I could get ready and be ready for our call. But I'm feeling like tomorrow might feel better. And you said, Seema, all day today, I've been feeling exactly that way too. Like it must be the summer solstice. It's bringing up this energy. It wants us to go inwards and use the energy to set intentions for creation. So let's push this to tomorrow then. Let's just be present with ourselves today. And and when I woke up this morning, my energy was different. Of course, it's evening for you. Your energy's different today too. And it's like there's this pep in our step today. And it's because we didn't judge, but no, we have this time. We must do it right now. It's a wait, well, we're feeling this way and it actually feels really good and it works to push it to tomorrow. So let's do that. We literally both just flowed with what felt right and the energy that felt right. Now, of course, if this was different and we had like a recording studio that we had to show up at that was prepaid for, we would show up. We know how to show up when we need to, but we've also learned how to flow when it feels right to flow. And I
Absolutely. I
think
think it's
that's the
important.
most important thing that I really want to, especially to women, because I know a lot of this is like women who are stepping out of their masculine and they really want to embody their feminine. And they're like, well, I want to, but how? How does that look like realistically? How does that look like? And it's literally just pay attention to what you're feeling without judgment. Because the old me, I think people don't realize how masculine I was once upon a
You
time.
know, that's so funny because I was literally just going to ask you, what is your story with your feminine energy? Because for me and like my perspective, when I first like met you in person like a year
Mm-hmm.
ago, I
Mm-hmm.
was like, just the way you carry yourself, the way that the standards and the boundaries that you set, you have like such a strong connection to your feminine energy. And I wondered, have you always been like that? Or you're going
No,
to explain?
I was one of those I was feminine the way that I was always very pretty, but I was so masculine. Like, I don't need a man to do this. I could do it by myself. I'm
Wow.
sorry, a man's not going to tell me what to do because my dad never told me what to do. So who do you think you are to tell me what to do? I was so masculine in those ways that it really took a lot of inner work and I felt so uncomfortable to sit and trust myself and listen to my feelings. I was one of those that when I first was introduced to like mirror work, I would like sit and it's just about getting in touch with yourself, looking at yourself. I was one of those that I would sit in front of the mirror. I was like, what is this bitch shit? What is this? Like that's how masculine I was. When someone would tell me, Seema, you have to give yourself grace. I'm like, grace is for pussies. Like what?
Oh
Like
my God, this is so funny.
people don't, I think people see this version of me, but this is
Yeah.
a very evolved version of me. I was not this. Like when you
Mm.
look at those, when you see those women who are like the boss babes who look externally very feminine, but you talk to them and you're like, oh my God, they're so masculine. That was me. And so I was, so it's like when I work with women, I'm like, you guys, I get it because I was there. I remember one of the courses I took was like the art of acknowledgement. And it's literally about just acknowledging other people, acknowledging uh, how they showed up in a certain way, acknowledging how they presented themselves, how they dressed, like, and it's just the art of acknowledgement. And it's a beautiful thing, like, oh, I acknowledge you for how you showed up today, like, thank you. I acknowledge you for taking accountability. Abby, that was the hardest thing for me to do. It was the most uncomfortable thing in my body to do because when we're acknowledging someone for something, we really step into our feminine, we step into our emotions, we step into that delicate side of us, and that delicate side is powerful, but we've been told it's weak. It was the most uncomfortable thing for me to simply acknowledge someone because I was so defensive and I was so in this like, okay, this is stupid. I don't need to be in touch with my feelings. Like, come on, I'm trying to get shit done. What does me getting in touch with my feelings have to do with me trying to build my spiritual business? Come on now. That was my mindset. That's how masculine I was. And I didn't realize the journey God was taking me on and really exposing me to my emotions. And that actually became the powerhouse, the foundation on which I actually built all of this stuff off of. And so I had to really learn to get very comfortable with my emotions, to say something bothers me. You said this, and you know what? This actually hurt me. Of course, I learned along the way accountability and not victimizing myself as well. But getting in touch with my emotions was the most uncomfortable thing ever. But now I look at it, I'm like, that's very silly of like younger Seema to think that of course, I had this vision for my business and what I get to create and how I get to help people. And I was like, how silly of me to think that like I wasn't going to be in touch with my own emotions to do this, because I'm literally working with people's frequencies, which is their emotions. Like I had to learn emotions to be able to tap into these frequencies. It's not just about receiving messages from counsel. It literally has everything to do with emotions. And
Oh my
so
God, it's so interesting. Obviously I'm seeing your human design in my. Do you remember I said to you about your emotional center in human design? And I said sometimes when you have like an undefined emotional center, and it sometimes we can avoid the confrontation or we can avoid emotions. And obviously, when we were talking about this, you're evolved from that now, and it's something that you've stepped into and use as like a beautiful intuition. And but it's so interesting that actually it was something before before you stepped into this evolution that you did avoid the
I did.
emotions around
Oh
you.
my God.
Wow.
I was raised as one of those of like emotions are weak,
Oh,
like be tough, and that's what's gonna make you strong in life. I used to think me pushing down or pushing my emotions away was strength. And so, a part of as we wake up to our feminine, again, for both men and women, it's about realizing that vulnerability is strength, and being in tune
so
with your emotions is a strength, not a weakness. I remember there was this podcast I listened to. I won't say which one, but I spoke to you about it, where this man and this woman were talking about women and why like women need men. And sure, women need men and men need women. I agree with that. But they were saying women need men because women will be um what's the word that they use? Women will be manipulated because it's women are more emotional and it's easy to manipulate people through emotions. And because women function through their emotions, that's a weakness. And women need men because men are logical and they can save women from their emotions and being manipulated by their emotions. And I remember listening to that podcast. I was like, this is the dumbest shit. This is the most unawakened shit I have ever heard. And granted, these two people are not spiritual people. It was not a podcast like that. But I was like, this is the issue. They have made the world, both men and women, believe that your emotions are your weakness and it's the center of how you get so manipulated. And you know what? The shadow side of emotions can be that. But when you awaken and you realize your emotions are one of the strongest tools that God has given you in this human experience, your emotions actually have you practice discernment and intuition. Nobody can fool you, manipulate you, or pull something over your head because you're in tune with your intuition, because you're in tune with your emotions. So that aspect of your feminine is actually the strongest tool you have. And especially as a woman, because we have much more emotions than men do. We're designed that way. And this is what gives the woman this powerful intuition and wisdom that she pours into her man, because he doesn't have that same level that a woman does. But that's the yin and the yang of people. And so I realized, I'm like, people are operating from this place and this unconsciousness, this unawakened way that we're living, where we are convinced that our emotions are our weakness. It's what makes us weak. It's what makes us manipulated. It's what makes a woman weak. It's, oh my God, it's all of her emotions. But when anyone really opens up and tunes into their emotion, that is literally the foundation of your spiritual strength, your wisdom, your guidance, and nobody can actually manipulate you because
and I also
you're
think when it comes to emotions, I actually think emotions are the source of all the beauty that we have in the world.
the source of
It's
everything.
it's the source of everything. It's the source of creativity, it's the source of beauty, it's the source of connection, it's the source of love. And I actually think the more in touch we get with our emotions and the more that we allow it, the more abundant our life actually becomes.
Absolutely. I think emotions is one of the things that was weaponized against all of us, but it's one of those things that was weaponized against the feminine. And they don't realize that they took away one of our greatest powers by belittling emotions, you
I
know? And
actually like when it comes to my own emotions. So through my own awakening journey, and I learned, of course, like human design was sort of like this entrance for me into my own awakening
yeah.
and understanding that I was emotional. I remember feeling like I remember speaking to my ex-boyfriend at the time and saying, "Oh, like I had a human design session and she told me that I was emotional." And he was like, "I could have told you that." And I was like, "Really?" I had no idea. I didn't think I was like this emotional person. But now
Uh-huh.
I look back on it, and the more I unraveled that within myself, the more I realized how emotional, many emotions I have as a person.
Right. Right.
And the more I realized that I actually, over time, I had really been suppressing them. I'd really
Mm-hmm.
been hiding them and never talking about them and just getting on with things. And
Mm-hmm.
now, like you said, I see my emotions as like such a
Huh.
superpower in my life.
I was going to ask you this. Do you think a part of it for you, because I think cultural stuff also influences us, and do you think a part of it for you being British, and I know British people are very like stoic, do you think a part of suppressing those emotions was from that cultural upbringing also?
Maybe. And one thing I have reflected on when it comes to the emotions that I suppressed. As a child, I remember like going to my room and like closing the door if I was upset. I remember, like sort of swallowing emotions. And I think reflecting on it, there was almost this knowing, this internal knowing that I had a lot of presence in my emotions, and I never wanted anybody else to feel emotional. I never wanted my emotions to affect other people. That was sort of like how I can reflect on it, look back on it as a kid. But definitely, I would say as well, there is definitely a cultural element to it as well.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, because I know for me, there's definitely a cultural element to it. Like, don't
hmm
show emotion because that's showing weakness. And like I remember if I was like younger and I was watching a movie with my mom, and let's say at the end of it, the main character that you're like building all of this connection to, the main character dies, I would sit there and I'm like, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry.
Same.
Because mom is gonna look at me and be like, are you a child? Why are you crying? It's just a movie. And
Mhm.
and it's like, and she was raised that way, and her parents were raised that way, and it's like a don't connect to your emotions because it's weak.
Mhm.
You have to teach yourself to be strong. And it's like, no judgment to our parents and the generations. Like, that's what they were taught. But I think that's one of the biggest things in our generation. We're really unraveling. Like, this is a generational thing that we are ending here, where it's the narrative that emotions are your weakness. And it's like,
Mhm.
no, how you interact with your emotions can be your strength or your weakness.
Yeah, for sure. And so, what was the turning point for you when it comes to really not just connecting with your emotions, but actually connecting with your feminine energy? If you were, as you said, you were feeling so masculine and you were really in like that defensiveness and in that masculine energy, what was the
You know,
tipping point?
I don't think there was a one thing or like a one moment where this happened. I think it was like over time, little by little, different pieces from like books I was reading, people I was interacting with, personal development trainings I did. Like, it all kind of like added up to one another.
Mm,
And the moment I realized that, oh my God, wait a second, I'm operating in my feminine because of these things that I created, was actually when my business reflected it to me more than anything. was when I started to realize when I wanted to like grow my business more, there's all these things on social media of like, create this funnel, do that funnel, post like this, speak like this, you should caption like this, you should create posts like this, you should put ads like this and make the ads this many times, and you should post 7 days a week, every day at this time, da da da. And I remember looking at all of that, and everybody was like falling into that like culture. And that's like when that new wave of coaching was coming out. Coaching was like that. It was very a masculine approach to coaching to build your Instagram. And I remember looking at that and I remember being like, this doesn't feel right. I'm not doing it. And I never did it. I never did one of these like do this so you could. I was like, what the fuck is the funnel? I don't want. I no. I never did the whole must post every day. I was like, I'm gonna do what feels right to me. I'm gonna post whenever I want to post, however I want to post. I'm gonna say whatever the heck I want to say. That's what I'm gonna do. And I just started showing up on my social media just very organically, and I did what felt right to me. And I started attracting clients, business started flowing, like everything started flowing in. And then, of course, my Instagram started growing. And then people would start to ask me, well, how did you do it? And I was like, I haven't paid for one single ad on Instagram. I was like, I haven't done any of that. And people were like, well, then how did you do it? Like, what's the formula? I'm like, the formula is not a logical formula. The formula was an intuitive formula. I just listened to myself. I didn't listen to what was being shoved down my throat because I realized my body was rejecting that and I was learning to listen to my body. My body was rejecting that and it was telling me to do something different. I simply did what I was called to do. And in that, I was like, holy shit, that's my feminine. I'm like, you're doing less and receiving what you want. You're not hustling, you're aligning. But in order to get to that point where I trusted myself, I did have to do that deeper inner work. I did have to do this facing my emotions, facing these things. People would call me, I remember I did a personal development training and they called me Ice Queen because I was just detached from my emotions and I was like, that makes me strong, so fuck you guys. But I had to literally melt that facade of the Ice Queen. I had to understand why I had built that Ice Queen facade. What was I defending? What was I protecting? What was I being told? And even this, it's not like I realized that and then I was feminine. It goes layers and layers and layers and layers. And like through my journey, I continue to discover how yes, there's that aspect of the feminine that is fierce, that is bold, that speaks her mind and is assertive and has boundaries. And that's very much a feminine thing. But there's also the feminine that's nurturing, that's calm, that's gentle. And she's as equally strong. She's just as powerful as that other side of the feminine. And like, and so it's something that I'm continuing to learn. It's something that I'm continuing to evolve and step into because it's not something we step into it and bam, we're at our destination. I don't think anything in life is that way. We step into it and we continue to grow and see the evolution of that for ourselves. But it was really in my business that I started to realize I was like, oh my God, wait a second. I'm operating for my feminine and it's working.
Yeah. I
What was
actually
the
was
moment that you realized it for you?
I think, as you say, like, I really believe it's a journey, life is a
Mhm.
journey. We're always finding new layers and levels of ourselves and nurturing those parts of ourselves and moving, to the next point. And I really think for me, when I left Hong Kong, so I was living in Hong Kong and it was so masculine and I could
Mhm.
feel it in my physical body. We spoke about my back pain before, but I was really suffering from really bad back pain when I was living there. And literally, like, my soul was calling for so many feminine sort of, what's the word? Feminine, like I was craving connection and
Mhm.
community with other women.
Mhm.
I was craving rest and retreat. I was craving creativity. All of these sort of pillars of, to me, what makes up feminine energy. I was craving them. And so for me, I from that, I knew that, okay, I'm operating in a very masculine energy because I'm in a very masculine environment. And that's when I was called to go to Bali. And while I was in Bali, I don't know, like Bali is a very feminine place,
It's a
but
portal.
it is. And what was funny is actually a few years prior to that, a medium had told me I would go to Bali for an extended amount of time and I would really switch on my feminine energy. Because it's always been a journey for me. I think I grew up with, a household of men. I've always been surrounded by masculine energy. What's interesting is my mom was a very traditional mother and wife, but I've always sort of been around that masculine energy. And so, you know, and I'm triple fire sign. So it's kind of, for me, it's always been really easy for me to take action.
Uh-huh.
It's something I'm learning a lot about myself as well is, you know, I do like to take action, but what I'm starting to move into even deeper in my business, Bali really sort of ignited so much of this feminine connection to myself and really like woke that up within me again. And I started noticing I come back to this phrase all the time: the less I do, the more I make. And honestly, inside my business, the less I do, the more I make. It is,
Mhm.
and I always get evidence for this, but
Yeah.
still, I was having this conversation today, I have the evidence for that, but I still find it hard sometimes to just lean back and just
Uh-huh.
trust.
Surrender to it. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's that, we've spoke about it. There's this conditioning in
Mm-hmm.
society, and it's kind of hardwired, that for us to you know, be successful in our businesses, to create the life that we want, we have to take that action. And I love taking action, but what is really coming online right now is that surrender. It's
Yeah.
like, and it's as how it is coming online is my intuition is becoming really strong about it.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want to do that. So I'm not going to do
You
that.
know, I think, like, as you're speaking, the thing that's coming up, I'm like, all these little things that happen for us in our lives like this. And like, so many people are getting tired of hustle culture and they want to learn, like, okay, these people are talking about like aligning and creating from there and they want to do that. What that's really doing, it is like, this is a part of like the global awakening and how we're shifting our planet. Because when more and more people literally get in tune with their emotions, and business might be the reason why you want to start doing that so you could work differently in your business, but it's like more and more people that do that, it really is creating this massive awakening for our earth. Can you imagine a world where people are really living and operating through this deep connection to their intuition and their wisdom and their emotions, and like what we get to create and what we're going to ultimately build on our world from that space?
Exactly.
Let's talk about practical things people can do to like start doing this, because I know that a lot of people are like, okay, this sounds great, I want to do this, where do I start from? And I think what a lot of people don't realize, where you start from is actually the emotional trauma that you start to unpack, the emotional work that you start to unpack, because so many people are like, well, I want to get there. And it's like, I know you want to bypass your emotions, your subconscious beliefs, your limiting beliefs. I know you want to bypass all those things, but you literally cannot bypass that. It starts from the emotional aspect. It starts from, okay, what emotions are coming up for me? What emotions do I get to process through? People want to
Also,
bypass the emotional
just
processing.
sorry, just to piggyback on what you've just said as well, because the us wanting to bypass the emotions and
Very
really,
masculine.
that's very masculine. It's masculine, right? And it's also that conditioning, you see it everywhere. It's like, lose 5 pound in a week, or, gain 10,000 followers in 30 days.
You know,
It's
one thing I really, really dislike, and I'm going to say this as a PSA to every spiritual coach out there, please doing this, and people stop falling for this shit. It's all of those things. 3 steps to finally find your purpose. These are the 4 steps to get into, and I'm like, that shit's not true. It's not like 1 step, 2 step, 3 step. Like it's making people think that like you can jump and you're there. So it's like a bypass and it's clickbait. But I'm sure anyone who's ever clicked one of those links or subscribed to an email to get that, it's like the 3 things are 3 steps to get you started. It
Yeah, exactly.
doesn't it doesn't get you there. It's to get you started.
A portal, it's an activation, it is a catalyst,
Mhm. Yeah.
but
And I think that's the
what you
thing, the
do with that
feminine,
is the difference.
exactly. It's like the feminine is the slow simmer. And
Mm,
that, like, the feminine is the long run. And so
mm.
if we're looking for, okay, what are the bam, 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 what I got to do to get it done? Like, you're just, that's the masculine, bam, 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 get it done. But when we find that balance between both like simmer and then action, simmer and action, simmer and action, that's like that balance. And everybody's trying to, they're like, okay, woo, we want to step into that balance. Okay, well, you got to simmer. And the simmer is you got to start being aware of your emotions. And sometimes that really looks like going to therapy to just start to unpack your emotions. Sometimes that's what it looks like. I did a lot of therapy when I was going through that season of my life. I was in therapy as well. I was literally sitting with someone every week unpacking my emotions because I had to become aware of what it is that I was even feeling that was getting in my way. And so sometimes it looks like that. Sometimes some people don't like therapy. That's fine. And I get it. Sometimes it's working with a coach and working on your emotions.
I always say something when it comes to coaches. I
Mm-hmm.
always say to everyone, like all of my friends, if they say, "Oh, I feel like I want to work with this person or something," I'm always like, do it because
Yeah.
that person has something to give you. The reason that you're pulled in, they have like a gift.
And that's taking action from your feminine. Exactly that.
Exactly. Yeah.
I feel called to do this. Ooh, I feel like I want to do this. Don't get logical about it. Answer the
Mhm.
call. That is literally taking action from your feminine. So I think that's one of like the practical tools that we could like reflect to people. When you feel called to doing something and you're like, I don't know why I feel called to doing this, that is literally being in your feminine and then using your masculine to take action. That.
It's enough
It's
as well. You don't need to know,
it's
like we don't need to
it's
know the outcome of something right away.
exactly. It's just when you
Mm.
feel called to doing it, you go, you do, and then you see the results of it. Then you see why you were called to that thing to begin with. And
I
so
think,
it's simply that. It's simply trusting your emotions and not letting it be this, I need a logical explanation to it. Now, here's the other thing, because I do want to talk about the shadow side to emotions. Some people are so wrapped in their emotions that they do get easily manipulated, and like people are just pulling at their heartstrings, so they're like they're paying for this, they're paying for that, they're supporting this, there's all through this emotions where they're not even grounded in it. An easy way to realize, are we in that emotional side of our feminine in a healthy way, or is it just like I'm getting just overturned by my emotions? It's, do you feel grounded in it? There's a difference in feeling your emotions, and then like there's this pendulum that swings this way and then it swings that way. If you feel like your emotions are swinging this way and that way, no, 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 no. We got to get grounded in our emotions to discern what we're feeling.
yeah. And does that, because sort of something I feel when you're sharing that is that more like the emotions that we may feel or how we react to those emotions? It's like we can feel like a victim. We can, why me? And we feel, angry and all of those things. But when we're in that like beautiful aligned feminine energy, at least this is part of what I'm experiencing myself, is those emotions can come up, but the way that I deal with it, the way that I look at it is in trust, surrender, and understanding.
And and it's, yeah, it's, there's a divinity in what's coming up for me. So it's not like a why me from a
Yeah.
victim space. It's like, why me? What is this giving me? And that's how we interact with the emotions. Some people get wrapped in the emotions and then it becomes chaotic, and it's like, well, feel it. And even then, Don't judge it. Show up with presence. Hmm, how come I'm showing up this way? I think one of the greatest things we could do, because I've learned a lot of people don't know how to process emotions. And no judgment, once upon a time, I had no idea how to do that. And I've learned one of the best ways in processing our emotions is meeting it without judgment, because all of our emotions are holding wisdom, are holding truth for us. And the only way we're going to receive the truth of what is coming up for us is actually sitting with it. Why did this trigger me? Why do I feel angry here? Why do I feel rage here? None of the emotions are wrong. They're not. If we live prolonged in a place of victimhood, of rage and anger, that's when it starts to harm us. But simply having those emotions is not wrong or bad. And it's exactly what you said. It's what we choose to do with them. And I've learned and I've seen the thing that works is sitting with them with curiosity to unpack what it's bringing up for us. That's the number one way we can actually learn and begin to process our emotions. Sit with them without judgment. Sit with them with curiosity.
And it's, it comes down to the word emotion. It means to move. It's energy
Mm-hmm.
that wants to move. So
Yes.
actually, when you are allowing yourself to sit with those emotions with curiosity, you're moving energy that is maybe sometimes no longer serving you. You're allowing it to move and you're creating space for something else.
Love that. Yes, that is so true. Exactly. And that's how you move it through.
Yeah.
Like, one example I always give my clients, I'm like, think of it like if you have a child and your child does something and you get really angry at them, they're not going to tell you why they did it or what happened. But if you sit and you're like, it's fine, it's okay, why did you do this? The child will tell you. Your emotions are the same thing. Literally, sit with your emotions and be like, why are we feeling this? Because so many people judge themselves. Well, I'm angry and I don't know. Okay, anger's wrong. Let me put it away. But it's like the anger is beautiful. The anger has divinity in it. The anger has wisdom in it. Sit with curiosity. Why am I so angry here? And it's okay. Honor the anger. You have to honor the thing that you want to release. You can't judge it. Judging it actually creates more of it. And like that's very much the feminine. That's very like I feel like when we are able to interact with our emotions in these ways, it is that completion of the feminine where we're going to allow that fire, that anger, that rage, that jealousy, that greed, whatever the emotion is, all these things that we're like, it's negative. It's not. When we allow those things to come up, but then we meet it with understanding, with compassion, with patience, with grace, that is both sides of the feminine coming into one. And that when we interact with our emotions that way, we learn. And it takes a little bit of a practice to learn this because we literally have forgotten how to do this, but it's an innate thing within all of us to be able to do this. When we learn how to do that, we're learning how to interact with our emotions. That is literally that fiery, dark side of the feminine and that light, nurturing, soft side of the feminine coming together. And then when you do that, and then you get in tune with your emotions, then you get clear, and then you're like, well, this is the action I want to take. Bam. That's where that masculine comes in of like, I could do this. I know how to do this. I'm destined to do this. Let's take action. And that's how you take aligned action. But the root, the foundation is the emotions, and it's giving yourself space to learn how to interact first and foremost with yourself in a new way.
Love that.
Yeah,
I
and
think,
it's uncomfortable at first. I get
yeah.
it.
And I love something I love about our relationship is literally we will send each other messages like, oh, this has come up for me. And we will then, like, we coach ourselves. Like, we have
Yeah,
created this connection and this self-trust with ourselves that we sort of are curious, like you said,
yeah,
about what is coming up, why is it coming up, what is it here to show me, how can I allow that to move, you know?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And like That, and once we get in tune with our own emotions, there's something that unlocks within our own vessel where we start to trust our own intuition. And that's what strengthens our intuitions. Many times people will ask, well, how do I strengthen my intuition? And I'm just like, well, we first got to get you in touch with your emotions. Once you learn how to unpack and have that dance with your own emotions, you start trusting yourself. When you trust yourself, that strengthens your intuition because you're listening to it now. And you realize where you're listening to your intuition and where you're abandoning it. And it just becomes a dance in life, and you start to see it. So you dance with it more and it strengthens it more. And as your intuition becomes strengthened, so does your discernment. Because when you're listening to someone talk about something, your intuition is going to be like, this doesn't sound right for me. This doesn't sound true.
Mm.
And that's where discernment kicks in, and you're like, that's a no for me.
Yeah, and I think your intuition, it's like a muscle. The more attention that
Exactly.
you give to it, the more that you acknowledge and start to listen to it, the stronger it
Mm-hmm.
becomes. And I know for
Yeah.
me, there came a point where my intuition got so strong that it was more difficult not to listen to it.
Yes. Oh, I love, Abby, I love that you said that because, yes, your intuition becomes so strong that it's difficult not to listen to it because for me, how that shows up, I will go into like an anxiety attack.
Wow.
And that's when I know I'm actually not listening to my intuition. This is why I'm feeling like this. I have noticed a lot of times, and for me, and like this is for my vessel, when I know I'm not listening to my intuition, my logic is kicking in and I'm double guessing what it is that I'm doing here. And I'm like, well, just do this, just see what happens. And I'm coming from a logical space, not from my intuition. I get anxiety.
I get
Mm-hmm.
indecisive. That's how it shows up for me.
Mm.
And this week I was supposed to go on like a little trip out to the Swedish countryside. And
Uh-huh.
but leading up to it, literally weeks leading up to it, I was just like, there was something that I just wasn't feeling it. And but I was kind of like in a way kind of gaslighting my intuition a little bit, and I was trying
Mm-hmm.
to say to my talk myself into it. That's what our mind tends to do. Well, what are you going
Right.
to do otherwise? It's a because I was going for this like Swedish celebration of the summer solstice. What are you going to do otherwise? Nobody else is in town. You'll be in the city
Logic.
by yourself. Like
Logic.
exactly. And I was going through all of these things, and I was just like, my body doesn't want to, and I don't know why, but I'm going to listen to it. And so I
Yeah.
listened to it, and I told my friend, like, last minute, you know what? I'm not going to come. And the next day, when I was supposed to be driving there, I knew. I was sitting there and I was like, oh my God, I'm so glad that I listened to my intuition. My
Yeah.
body knew before my mind did.
Yeah. And
So
I
the
remember
body,
because you told me about it, but you were being indecisive about the decision. And then you're like, and here's what I want to point out to people. You were being indecisive, but you weren't judging yourself for being indecisive. What you said to me, because we were trying to plan when we're going to record this podcast, and you said to me, you're like, you know what? This is what's coming up for me. I haven't made a decision yet. Let me give myself some time to sit with myself and see what feels right for me. And then I'll decide if I'm going or not. So you acknowledge the indecision because you've realized when you don't listen to your intuition, you get indecisive. And instead of judging yourself for being indecisive, you sat with it. You're like, well, what is this telling me? What is it that I'm not wanting to do that I'm logically trying to force myself into doing? And logically, it makes sense to go this weekend, but intuitively in your body's like, no, I'd rather be alone here. And then you chose to stay like in Sweden this weekend, and then you're like, that feels wonderful to me. And look, that's how you just process all of these emotions.
exactly.
And that's it. That's how we do it. Like we just, and we all do it. And I think it's so unique to see that. For me it shows up as anxiety, for you it shows up as indecision. And like, and that's just to tell people, because I think when people hear people talking about this, like, oh, then it must show up as anxiety or indecision, like those are the two things. And it's like, no, 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 that's for me and that's for Abby. As you pay attention to yourself, you will see, wow, when I don't listen to my intuition, what does that look like for me? Because it looks like something different for so many people. Now, for some people, it might look like anxiety. For some people, it might look like becoming indecisive. But for others, it might look like something completely different. And I think it's so important to just listen to what shows up. And what it is, it's you feel out of flow.
Yeah,
Anxiety takes you out of flow. Indecision takes you out of flow. That's when you're like, wait, I'm not listening to something because there's some sort of static coming up here. And so what's happening there?
sometimes I think it's actually a really good trick for people to look back on moments or decisions that they've made in their life where they did trust their intuition. How did it
Yes,
feel? What happened? And also the opposite. When their intuition was saying, it could be, don't start a business with this person or don't, go on this trip or whatever it is. You can use your past as evidence
yes,
as to
yes.
what happens when you do trust your intuition and what happens when you don't.
Yes, I 10,000% agree with you. And I think it is such an important thing to do that because when we do that, the importance of doing that is when we want to shift and start working and trusting our intuition. If you haven't operated that way, the body's going to be like, no, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And we go into freak out mode and then we go into what we know has kept us alive. And so it's like, I'm going to choose logic. And so when we want to lean into trusting our intuition and making decisions from that space, when, like you said, you use your past as like an inventory of like, well, look, when I trusted my intuition, here it worked. And when I didn't, this is what happened. You use that literally as something to tell your body, no, look, it's safe. We get to trust this. And that's actually, yes, that's a very good practical thing we could use to lean into it. And if people are like, I don't know any times that I've trusted my intuition. Well, something told you to listen to this podcast, did it not? That actually was your gut. It
Yeah.
wasn't logic that said, let me go listen to them. Even the way any of you guys found Abby or I, it wasn't your logic that's like, let me go listen to them. Something in you was like, let me go listen to this podcast. And one of us happened to be on it. Or, let me go work with this person. And it was a very intuitive thing. So you're just not realizing that you have always been operating intuitively. You just haven't been acknowledging it because logic was given more power than intuition. Logic was given like, oh, that's better. Good job on being so logical. So we tend to like empower logic, but people aren't realizing you are in nature a spiritual being having a spiritual experience here. Your intuition is a part of that. So you have been always operating intuitively. You just haven't been acknowledging it.
And the mind,
Honestly, look at it. It's there.
the mind just wants to keep us safe, and the mind
Exactly.
only knows what is safe by what it has seen and what it has
Mhm.
experienced and the
Yeah.
memories that it has gathered. That is how the
Hmm.
mind determines if something is safe or it's not. And so when your intuition is guiding you, for example, when I was called to go to Bali, I didn't know anybody there.
Right.
My mind could have talked me out of that so easily. But
Hmm.
I felt in my body, and this is where my intuition deeply served me. I felt in my body, I need to go there. There's
You know
something.
what? You're bringing up a really, really important topic here too, and this is something a lot of people ask. How do I know the difference between my ego and my intuition? A
Mm,
lot of people ask this question, like, and I absolutely understand where sometimes we get confused on that. Sometimes even myself in certain situations, I'm like, is this my ego or my intuition? Because again, it's an evolution of life. You're having new experiences, and I'm like, I've never been at this crossroad. Like, what's what? The number one thing I always tell people, and Abby, you can give what definition you like to give people or what example you like to give people. I always like to tell people, your ego is going to come from your head, your intuition is going to come from your body, it's going to come from your heart. Sometimes people still get confused by that, and I'm like, okay, your ego is going to justify it. No, because of X, Y, and Z, or yes, we should do this because of X, Y, and Z. Your intuition is not going to give you a yes or a no. It's just going to be like no or yes. That's it. Intuition doesn't rationalize, it doesn't justify. There's no logic to intuition. That's how you can tell if it's ego or intuition. Ego is going to be like, yes, because X, Y, and Z. And then it's going to go into your memory and be like, you see, because when you did this and you did that and you did this. And ego is going to give you all of these logical things to keep you safe. Intuition is simply yes and no. And look, sometimes intuition really doesn't make sense. Sometimes we're like, this makes absolutely no sense. And it's in those moments where we get to trust our intuition and lean in, and you see, like, you reap the rewards afterwards. I'm going to give a very silly I'm going to give a very silly and small example because this shows up in so many different aspects of our lives. One day I was at Trader Joe's. It's a grocery store in America, and I say that because you're in Sweden, so you guys don't have Trader Joe's there. But I remember my intuition has always told me, don't buy chicken from Trader Joe's. Even though they say it's organic and blah, 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 my intuition would always tell me, don't buy chicken from Trader Joe's. And I remember one day I was there, I was picking up some stuff. I was like, well, I want to like put chicken in this dish. And I was like, my intuition was like, don't get it, don't get it, don't get it. It was like, no, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And then my logic came in. Oh, but like it's already 6 o'clock. By the time we want to go to Whole Foods or somewhere else to get chicken, it's like then you're gonna get home by 7 and then you're gonna cook and it's gonna be so late. And whatever, we can just pray over the chicken and like change the energy of the chicken. Like it's not that big of a deal. Sima, like a million logical things that my brain was telling me. And I ended up going with my brain and not my intuition. My intuition was screaming no, and I ignored it. So I bought the chicken. I go home. I'm like, no problem. I'm going to pray over the chicken. I'm going to change the frequency of the chicken. The chicken's going to be just fine. I cook the chicken. I make this gorgeous dish. I eat it. A couple hours later, I have food poisoning.
Oh my God.
I was so sick the rest of the night, and I was like, my intuition was literally screaming at me, telling me no, and my logic came up with 1,000 different, very good reasons. Logic is going to give you really good reasons. My intuition was just like, no, no.
Convincing, like
Yeah, and so
convincing.
I just listened to my logic in that instance, and then I got food poisoning. I was like, oh, that's what my intuition was telling me. And I was like, you know
Yeah.
what? Next time, I was like, intuition, lesson learned. I'm listening, and I'm like, logic, take a backseat, babe. Like we're gonna trust her,
I mean, for me as well, like when it comes to explaining that difference, I find that our intuition is quite calm. It's like this calm
Yeah.
feeling. But what I always say is it doesn't always make sense. Like you said, it doesn't make
Yes.
sense. Sometimes you can't articulate or explain why you want to make a decision in this way. It's, the story of me going away this week. It's, you know, my friend is super understanding and she gets it, and
Mhm.
she could have been, but why? What are you gonna do? Like, why? And I was like, but she didn't. She was like, I get it. Don't worry.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know why I don't want to go, but I don't
Yeah.
need to. But later.
Yeah. I love what you said. Intuition is what? Like intuition is like calm. What did you say intuition
It's
is?
calm. I feel very calm when I
Yeah.
am
And I think
making a decision from that place.
I
It
think
feels
that's a very, very powerful and important thing you said, because yes, once we say yes to what our intuition is saying to us, if we look at our body, there is a sense of calm that comes with it. Even if we're going into a situation or something we've never done before, and we could be like, oh my God, like what's going to happen here? But there is a sense of calm with the decision that we made. There's a sense of like, it feels like the key went in and it turned perfectly and it's like locked and loaded. And yeah, that's a good thing to tell people to pay attention to.
and I think for me, that is almost like the pinnacle of feminine energy is that trust.
Yes, yes, yes,
That
yes,
trust in yourself, that trust in what you
yes.
cannot see, that trust
Oh
in
my God, yes.
Like for me, and that's the pinnacle of feminine energy.
That
Trust.
is the pinnacle of feminine. Mic drop. That's it. I have nothing else to say.
And
You
so
know,
come back next week and just kidding.
and we'll decide some other stuff we want to talk about next week. But I will say this whole time, there's a book that keeps coming up for me that I've read that I feel like is a very, very beautiful manifestation book. But it literally emphasizes in this book how our emotions are the powerhouse of our soul and we must work with our emotions. It's called, I'm sure, maybe you've heard of this too, Abby. It's called Ask and It's Given by Esther and Jerry Hicks. It's it's
I
a beautiful book.
I've I listened to
I
so
personally, on my spiritual journey, books have been a beautiful part of my journey because it's a way that I can learn from other people and their experiences. Like some people like to listen to podcasts and people like to do through different things. Books have been one of those really big ones for me that like that's how I learn from other people and their journey and their story and their wisdom. And I love, 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 love learning from other people. And I also then discern what I like to take away and what I don't. But this Esther and Jerry Hicks have a lot of beautiful books. This one book has been one of my favorites, and it's one of the books that I'm like, absolutely everybody read this book. And I think it's a good book speaking on the topic of emotions. Ask and It's Given by Esther and Jerry Hicks.
love that. For me as well, I actually feel really feminine when I'm reading a book because
Yeah.
it feels slow. It feels like,
Mm-hmm.
do you know what I mean? Like I just feel like slow and in like this state of receiving when I'm
You
reading
know
a
what it
book.
is? When we're reading a book, we're not doing other things. And I think this is one reason why I'm not a big fan of audiobooks. We can't do other things. When you're reading a book, that's presence.
Exactly.
Presence is
Mm-hmm.
feminine energy.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Ah,
presence in that space.
well, I
So
love
I love this. I hope this supported people and it gave them some like practical tips, tricks, and like understanding that like it's not just a you turn on your feminine energy. It's a series of things that we do over and over and over and over. And even once we step into it, there's still an evolution of it because we are always moving forward. And so I hope this gave everyone little bits and pieces. It planted little seeds for you. It nudged you in a direction that you feel called to. And we'll see you next week.